I've literally dissected his lab work myself, and the guy's just walking around super physiological ball sack 24/7. Is that, like, if you're comparing like something like that, would that individual, should he be banned from doing like everything in life because he's just disproportionately better in, you know, a hormonal aspect and more superior to a guy who's not enhanced? Like, he's basically walking around on a cycle all the time. And this is sort of the equivalent of these chicks, you know, they're walking around on a cycle pretty much from their natural production. What's up guys, Derek, moreplace1dates.com. Today we are going to be talking about the Olympics again. This is a hot topic recently, and it is sort of has a lot of overlap with the recent discussion of trans athletes competing in sports with biological females, and you know, the inherent advantages they have from a structural aspect, psychological aspect, muscle accrual over time aspect, fucking bone density aspect. All of these things that have been developed through their youth, through their puberty, through adulthood, exposure to these androgens with differing levels of estrogen, growth hormone, IGF-1, etc., and then transitioning to become a female later in life and how it affects their performance, how fair is it, blah, blah, blah. But now we have a more interesting and probably more highly debated discussion around the banning of biological females who have testosterone levels that are inherently too high through natural production. So on one side of the spectrum, we have biological men who are transitioning into females and manually crushing their testosterone levels. However, they retain all of these structural advantages, not all of them, but the majority of them, you know, fucking like hand size, limb length, bone density. A lot of this stuff is retained even if they crush their androgen levels and take, you know, exogenous estrogen, whatever it is that they deem appropriate for their transitioning process. And they have a huge amount of leeway to with the amount of time they have to actually have their testosterone levels under either 10 nanomoles per liter or 5 nanomoles per liter, depending on the event. It seems like there is differing rule sets depending on the events, and some of them don't even have restrictions. It's kind of weird. So like obviously 10 nanomoles per liter for weightlifting, we discussed how ridiculously lenient that is when you actually go to convert it. 10 nanomoles per liter is about 288 nanograms per deciliter. So that is literally the equivalent of a male, you know, that's still in male territory. A healthy top functioning female is producing at most, you know, like 50, 60, 70 nanogram per deciliter of total test. And that's not even factoring in their disproportionately higher sex hormone binding globulin production, which consequently binds up way more of their otherwise free testosterone that a biological male would have a disproportionate advantage in, by having lower binding protein production, in addition to all of the other biological benefits that come from not being a biological female. So anyways, the 288 is a fucking ridiculous cutoff, especially given the amount of time that you need to be under that beforehand. And it's like, even if you're under that, like what? You're still like fucking almost over 5 times higher than the majority of females you're competing against. Like, it's absolutely ridiculous. I think most people are on board with that, but this discussion is about 5 nanomole per liter cutoff. We're talking about 144 nanograms per deciliter. So this is, you know, double what a top functioning elite female is who's otherwise healthy. Now, in certain cases like polycystic ovarian syndrome, insulin resistance, things that otherwise aren't going to help your performance, but are typically indicative of some sort of, you know, chronic health issue and induced by, you know, depends on the issue. Obviously there's different things that can cause that kind of an outcome, but hyperandrogenic states and having supraphysiological testosterone levels, now supraphysiological compared to the reference range of females, this would put you outside of anything above this, puts you outside of what certain Olympic events deem to be fair. So the most recent issue, top 400 meter sprinters ruled ineligible due to testosterone rule. This is literally just published yesterday. 2 of the world's 3 fastest women's 400 meter sprinters this year were ruled ineligible to run the event at the Olympics due to a rule capping testosterone levels in women's events from the 400 meter through the mile, according to their National Olympic Committee. I might butcher this. Namibians Christine Maboa and Beatrice Mazalingi, both 18 have a natural high testosterone level after undergoing medical tests for athletes with differences of sexual development, according to the Namibia Olympic Committee. So maybe I should go click that and see what it is. According to the rules of World Athletics, this means that they are not eligible to participate in events from 400 meters to 1600 meters, according to the committee. It is important to understand that both our athletes were not aware of this condition, neither did any family member, their coach, or the NNOC CGA. Namibia Olympic Committee were aware of it. Both Christine and Beatrice will be able to compete in the 100 meter and 200 meter events. So there's different rules for how much test you can produce as a natural between 100 meter sprint, 200 meter, 400 meter, all the way up to 16. At the 400, all of a sudden you're not allowed to have a 144 nanogram per deciliter total anymore. But if you are sprinting, you can have over that. You know, if you're sprinting 100 meters or 200 meters, it's, you know, okay apparently. So this is the press release. I don't know if there's really a point of digging in further. It seems like it is basically, yeah, basically just summarizing, that was just summarizing the point. So by the way, these are the two, the runners here. So we have Namibia's Christine Maboa and Beatrice Mazalingi have been withdrawn from the 400 meter race at the Olympics by World Athletics. They said not to be eligible for female. They are said to not be eligible for female classification. The same rules are affecting Caster Semenya, Francine Neon Seba, and Margaret Wambui. Look at those cap delts, fuck dude. So this is the athletes in question here, mid-stride. Let's see, Christine Maboa set the African senior and world U20 record in 400 meter at age 18, making her the 7th fastest woman ever at the event. Let's see, anything else in here worth noting? Beatrice ran 49.53 seconds in the 400 meter, setting an unofficial 3rd fastest world under 20 time in history. Okay, so you get the point. So, the fuck? I just noticed on the what's happening under the trending in Canada, Satan, 27.8K tweets. Trending in Canada, aliens. Like, what the fuck, dude? Anyways. So, it's the same rule that affected all 3 Rio Olympic 800 meter medalists. Caster Semenya of South Africa, Francine, and Margaret, and Aminatu, who was the world's 3rd fastest 400 meter runner in 2019 before moving to the 200 meter for that year's world championships. Maboa and Mazalingi burst onto the scene this year. Maboa lowered her personal best from 51.57 seconds to 48.54, running a world U20 record fastest time in the world this year on Wednesday. Okay, so anyways, obviously they're fucking killing it. They can either move up or down in distance or take testosterone suppressing measures and stay under the limit for 6 consecutive months before being able to compete in those events. So the reason being, the World Athletics rule went into effect 2019, capping test levels in women's events from 400 meter through the mile for athletes with differences of sexual development. World Athletics said that no female athletes would have a level above 144, if I recall correctly, nanograms per deciliter, unless they had a DSD or a tumor. So apparently if you have a tumor, then that's fine. But if you don't have a tumor, then you're not allowed. What the fuck, dude? Okay, so anyways, these 2 individuals were banned due to producing too much test. We know that the cutoff is about half of that of Laurel Hubbard for competing in the weightlifting, and also the duration of time that they needed to be under the cutoff is much shorter. Like, I think it was like a year for Laurel, if I recall correctly. But anyways, obviously there's different fucking rules for different events, and it's kind of all over the place. If you have 100 meter and 200 meter, it's fine. For weightlifting, you can be like fucking a guy pretty much. And when I say that, I mean literally on paper, your testosterone levels are 288 nanograms per deciliter is a fucking, in the reference range of males, it is physically impossible for a female to produce that much. And let's see, the other article, was there any differentiating information here? Basically, so this was a big deal with Caster Semenya. A lot of people have actually asked me to cover that. I just never got around to it, but I guess I'm circling back to it now. The efforts to bar Semenya also demonstrates how easy it is to undermine women, in particular, racialize women by shifting the goalposts and requirements for entry into womanhood. Others have said the rules discriminate against intersex athletes. Intersex people are born without any number of chromosomal, gonadal, hormonal, or genital features that cause their bodies to physically manifest some combination of stereotypically male or female biological features. So yeah, like, I don't know what these girls' testosterone levels actually are. Are they like, you know, pseudo hermaphrodites who have the gene mutation in the gene that encodes for 5-alpha reductase, and it ends up with a, you know, disproportionately high testosterone level equivalent to that of a guy, but then they lack sexual development because of the total absence of DHT. You know, like, what is the case here? I highly doubt that's the case, by the way. I'm just saying an example of, you know, like an in-between scenario where you would be unsure of what to, like, in general, I guess once they go through puberty, pseudohermaphrodites end up being classified as males, and in general they differentiate themselves through the sheer testosterone production, but it's not specified what their testosterone levels actually are. You know, like, we don't know how far above 144 they are. We don't know where they're at. We just know that they exceeded it by some capacity. And that sort of begs the question, is this actually fair? Like, when you had, for example, this was an article I saw that was pretty interesting about Michael Phelps. It's a bit of an old article, but he had a bunch of differentiating things about him that made him very unique from his competitors that obviously gave him a massive competitive advantage, and they didn't ban him from competing for them. So for example, disproportionately vast wingspan, double jointed ankles to give his kick unusual range. In a quirk that borders on supernatural, Phelps apparently produces just half the lactic acid of a typical athlete. So this kind of shit is, like, obviously not fair objectively. You know, if you're an athlete who's competing against Phelps, it's like, fuck, this sucks. I'm competing against a guy with fucked up ankles. He's got a fucking mutant wingspan, and he produces half the lactic acid that I do. So it's like, how the fuck am I supposed to hang with him? Well, that's sort of what makes a elite genetic phenom, is some sort of unique characteristics that are 1 in a million, 1 in a billion potentially, that nobody else has. So when it comes to these Olympic athletes who have, you know, disproportionately high testosterone levels, you know, should they be banned from competing? Like, I know a guy, he's a very successful entrepreneur, and he literally produces naturally like 1650 to 1700 nanograms per deciliter total test. That's like the equivalent of walking around on a fucking cycle naturally. I've looked at his blood work. His gonadotropins are always in range. The guy is not a fake natty. I've literally dissected his lab work myself. And the guy is just walking around super physiological ball sack 24/7. Is that, like, if you're comparing like something like that, would that individual, should he be banned from doing like fucking everything in life because he's just disproportionately better in, you know, a hormonal aspect and more superior to a guy who's not enhanced? Like, he's basically walking around on a cycle all the time. And this is sort of the equivalent of these chicks, you know, they're walking around on a cycle pretty much from their natural production. But again, circling back to the Phelps thing, is that just something that is unique to them that gives them that's what makes them a fucking Olympic champion, is that they have some unique characteristic that nobody else can replicate. And that's like, if you're gonna handicap the fuck out of people to the point that you're making them take anti-androgens to pull them back down to a 70 or a 60 or something to match everybody else's natural production, like, how far do we go? It's like, at that point, how the fuck do you have even like elite athletes to begin with when you're like handicapping them and then not handicapping other individuals because of, you know, it's not I don't know, might be frowned upon because you're not being inclusive or some shit. Like, it's just weird, like, where the lines are being drawn. And I don't think it's easy for them either, because it's like, I can see the arguments from both sides for, like, this argument in particular is a bit more debatable in my opinion. Although in my personal opinion, I think that if an individual, a female, who is a biological female at birth, did not undergo puberty with massive exposure to DHT and testosterone with low estrogen levels concurrently, wasn't able to develop the fucking bone density, the androgenic signaling, all this shit that an actual biological male has, if they don't have that, but they have a slightly super physiological T because they, I don't know, I've seen some like cholesterol hyper responders who like have, for whatever reason, their lipid profile is like severely elevated all the time, but then they also have a super high T level, like super physiological, like even Vigorous Steve, he's been featured on the Bio Bros Super Physiological Man podcast many times. His wife, she naturally produces like, I don't know, like 80, 90, 100, something like that. Like, should she be handicapped just because she fucking produces that? Or is that, like, again, a differentiating factor that makes these individuals the elite genetic specimens that they actually are? So, you know, it's kind of weird where they like draw the line. It's like some events you're allowed a certain test and then some of them you're not. And then some of them they'll like tell you need to take anti-androgens and some of them you don't. And then some of them you're allowed fucking almost 300 nanograms per deciliter. And like, even you have to be under 288 for like a fucking year, but you're still allowed to be like fucking 5, 6, 7 times higher than a natural female, and that's you handicapping yourself is going to like 250 relative to the 50 that somebody naturally produces who's like an elite female who doesn't have any of the shit you develop through puberty as a biological male, and you're still 5 times higher test, and you have all that pre-existing structural foundation advantages in a competitive aspect. Like, fuck, dude. Like, it just, like, where is the logic in some of this shit? So for me, this one is an interesting one. It's gonna be interesting to see the comments. I don't know, like, if people are going to be very, very divided on this one, or if it's going to be pretty one-sided still. But like, in general, for me, if a girl is literally walking around with like a 150 nanogram per deciliter total, you know, am I gonna say as a, you know, like, I'm not an Olympic fucking judge or something, but if I was, would I say like, no, like, that's not fair, like this, every other chick has, you know, 70 or less. You've got to take fucking cyperterone acetate. You've got to take spironolactone. You've got to take fucking bicalutamide. You've got to take something to crush this shit, because it's just not fair. No, like, if you're actually legitimately a biological female who has not had some of, like, all of the advantages of being a male, then I would think that it makes sense that you're just an outlier, a genetic phenom who is, you know, maybe in Michael Phelps territory, you know? That kind of stuff. It's like, what are you gonna do? Chop off his fucking ankles and make him like crack his bones and like make them normal so then he doesn't have this advantage? Or like fucking cut like an inch off of his wingspan or something? Like, I don't know. That kind of stuff is like, you know, are you going to introduce lactic acid into him exogenously to like equate it to all the other athletes? Like, how far do you go with this shit? So this is gonna be an interesting one. The uproar about it is real. You know, people are obviously there's a lot of athletes getting banned now, and you know, it should be interesting to see where the line gets drawn, because it's really weird too how like the events are so drastically different with no kind of consensus on what makes sense, what's fair, where to draw the line, like what the fuck is going on. And yeah, there's a lot of leeway for fucking cheating for sure too. I'm not saying any of these athletes are, but you know, with these cutoffs, there's like the amount of leeway in male sports is obviously like a little bit more precise in that there's not weird cutoffs for shit. There's no biological females transitioning to males that I know of that are taking a shit ton of testosterone and then competing against biological males and smoking them because they did not go through puberty as males. So they're at that structural disadvantage, an overall disadvantage from having a lifetime of non-exposure to these anabolic androgenic compounds, or, you know, endogenous compounds, you know, molecular signaling, whatever the fuck you want to call it. But on the other side of the spectrum, we have like the super complicated female side of sport, where it's like there's like different testosterone cutoffs, different things you're allowed. People are on anti-androgens, people are on exogenous estrogen, people are on exogenous all over the fucking place. It's like there's definitely leeway for tons of fucking cheating too, for women who just want to like take a little bit of something and then claim that they're within, you know, some crazy cutoff that allows them to have a 5 times higher test than a fucking natural endogenous female production. Like, this shit's mental. So I don't know, let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. This is definitely going to be an interesting, heated discussion as the days go on here, but all the comments help the algorithm. They're much appreciated. Like, subscribe, check out my blog, moreplatesmoredates.com, follow me on Instagram at moreplatesmoredates, Facebook, Snapchat, BitChute, Twitter, TikTok, Apple Podcasts. I said BitChute, but fuck that place. I do not post. I can't help but say it. If you want to follow me there, you can. I'm just never going to post there, and unless they fix their fucking algorithm. So BitChute, if you're watching, get your shit sorted. If you want to support the channel, you can check out anything I'm associated with in the video description below. My TRT clinic, it's all telemedicine from the comfort of your own home. If you want to get high quality oversight by doctors who've been vetted and I trust to actually interpret your labs and not just give you a fucking cookie cutter script and kick you out the door with tests and anastrozole and HCG, you actually get oversight from people who want to see you optimized and healthy and don't just care about getting you on fucking pharmaceuticals. They want to actually dial you in, even if it is from a lifestyle, sleep hygiene, diet model standpoint, before you look to the pharmaceuticals, if warranted. And that is why we pride ourselves on making our money on the high quality service and medical oversight rather than just the margins on the medications. As well as my recommended lab tests and diagnostics. It's in the video description below. You can use the recommended panels we pre-designed, or you can just get single markers added, or you can add single biomarkers to the existing panels. It's up to you. but it is very customizable and yeah, turnkey for all of the pre-designed panels though too. We've spent a lot of time designing those based on what we think are the most critical biomarkers to hit for those specific scenarios. And anything else I'm associated with, Gorilla Mind, nootropic formulas, Gorilla Mode, pre-workout formulas that design myself from scratch, recommended diet model for gaining muscle, sports performance, while being mindful of micronutrient intake, sleep hygiene, gut health, etc. That is all in the video description below. Thank you guys for watching. Talk to you soon.